If you were just about anywhere along the East Coast in America this past winter, I bet you felt that kind of cold that hurts your face. Struggle to dig out your car, or perhaps trudge through the snow to get to work. Even in the South and Southeast, where the cold and snow isn't that common, wintry spells hit pretty hard. Georgia was one of those states, having 2 significant back-to-back snowstorms in January. The first wallop from the 10th to the 11th, and then from the 21st to the 22nd.
GDOT is gearing up for the winter storm bearing down on North Georgia.
Georgia DOT has activated its winter weather response plan.
As snowfall and icy conditions gripped much of Georgia, the Department of Transportation worked overnight to treat roads in Atlanta.
GDOT is working to keep roads clear.
The DOT says interstate, state routes, and critical roads like hospital areas are the biggest priority.
Now, the good news is GDOT was out working hard the last couple of days and even overnight last night.
As long as it takes, we're going to continue to treat, plow, and try to make these roads passable.
In these conditions, do you ever stop to think about the work that goes into keeping our roads and transportation infrastructure safe, resilient, and reliable? Many of us may take it for granted, but all of our states put a lot of long hours, preparation, and coordination into planning for all sorts of conditions, from disasters like hurricanes to the everyday maintenance of our critical infrastructure. This is Empathy Affect, the Force Marsh Media podcast that explores the human side of government. I'm Melissa Szynski, and today we're going to give a little love to our state transportation departments. Joining us today is a Georgia Department of Transportation, or GDOT veteran, Matt Needham. After beginning his career as a civil engineer designing, building, and maintaining the roads that millions of Georgians rely on, he's now the Assistant State Emergency Operations Coordinator. He's going to walk us through GDOT's important work in everyday safety and maintenance of Georgia's transportation infrastructure and how he coordinates with state partners to prepare for and protect Georgians during emergencies. Matt, welcome to the show. I'm excited to share the great work that you do with the Georgia Department of Transportation.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Excellent. So you've spent the last 20 plus years of your career as a civil engineer working at Georgia Department of Transportation, pretty much starting there right after finishing school. So what drew you to want to become an engineer and apply those skills at Georgia DOT?
Yeah, so, growing up, I was always, I won't say great at math, but I was good at math and I enjoyed it, like solving problems, that kind of thing. And so, through counselors and stuff, you kind of get directed towards an engineering kind of type of a job. So I ended up going to Georgia Tech, started out in electrical engineering, and then quickly decided that civil was more suited for me. I like the part of civil where you're building roads and bridges and buildings and that type of thing. So I got my civil engineering degree at Georgia Tech. GDOT actually came to a job fair, and I talked to them, and they really had a good presentation of their company, so to speak. They, talked about work-life balance. That would get a chance to work on major, interchange projects.
Georgia DOT is consistently working to ensure that our state's transportation network is robust, from rail, roads, waterways, aviation, and even transit.
It is the most ambitious project GDOT has taken on in decades, adding express lanes to the top-end perimeter.
What is the latest from the state?
GDOT says they finished most of the work on the 2nd Street Bridge.
And within hours of us bringing it to GDOT's attention, there were crews out installing the new posts to keep drivers safe.
We're thankful that Channel 11 brought this to our attention and that we were able to move as quickly as we did.
And now we are hearing from GDOT about how they're working to improve safety.
Georgia Department of Transportation announcing phases 4 and 5 of the interchange improvements project will get underway on Monday.
GDOT's transformation project is designed to improve traffic flow on 285 and 400. That includes the construction of 32 bridges, many of them flyover ramps.
One of the ones I ended up working on was the 85-316 project as the project engineer. So just being able to build those things, and you drive through them every day and say, hey, I had a part in building that. So it's just always been a career field that I was interested in, and I've been doing it ever since. So started in 2002 and still going strong at GDOT.
Now, more so the last few years, you've been serving as the Assistant State Emergency Operations Coordinator. So what are some of the emergencies and conditions that Georgia encounters, and what is the role of GDOT in managing those situations?
Yeah, for Georgia, we typically encounter hurricanes, tornado outbreaks. We get occasional snow and ice and flooding. Those are the most common ones from Georgia. It's not to say there's not some one-ofs or whatever, but those are the typical ones we deal with. Our role, I'm an emergency operations group right now. We have 5 team members, and our job with our team is basically to manage the statewide response for one of those. So for hurricanes or snow and ice, our 5 people are coordinating the movement statewide of all 7 of our GDOT districts. So if it's a hurricane event, we're coordinating with the northern districts that won't be as affected to move those response teams down south, stage them, and have them help with the response. And vice versa for snow and ice, we'll bring up our South Georgia teams, depending on the event, and they will come up and help plow and salt the roads for that. But that's our major responsibility is to help coordinate that statewide effort.
As you were talking there, you were mentioning how, there's coordination across different geographical areas of the state, but I'm sure that preparing for these emergencies also requires a lot of coordination with state agencies and entities. So who are your partners in planning out for emergencies, and how do you work together in both preparation and during disasters?
Yeah, so GDOT is what is called a ESF1, or an Emergency Support Function 1. There are 16 of these emergency support functions. The other 15 of those are led by each of the respective state agencies. So you have State Patrol, which is ESF 13. You have Forestry, Department of Defense. So there's 16 total of us. And when there's an emergency, those 16 leads will come down to GEMA Homeland Security in a big giant room to help coordinate a statewide event. We were down there for the January snow and ice events. We work mainly with State Patrol during most of our events. They provide our plow teams and brine teams escorts so that they're safe going down the road. If it's a hurricane, State Patrol will provide traffic control with blue lights for us. So they're our major partner. They're actually in the same room with us down there. But we also work with all the other ones. So Forestry helps us out. They have saw teams that during hurricanes and debris, they can help cut trees up and things like that. But having those leads of each of those agencies down there basically moves the decision of the whole agency to one person, and you're all in the same room with them. So things get done, really fast, and decisions are made really fast. It's a big help having that. But yes, we work with all the other 15, depending on the event. We've worked with public health during COVID, and just depends on the event. But typically we work with State Patrol and Forestry and those kind of agencies.
When a disaster strikes, what does a typical day look like for you and your team at GDOT and the partners you just mentioned? Can you walk me through the response process?
Yeah, depending on the event, say snow and ice, we know it's coming in a few days. We'll typically start several days before the event. We're talking to National Weather Service, meteorologists, things like that. We're setting up our staffing schedules for our emergency operations teams. We're notifying our 7 districts, to be prepared and get their equipment ready for the response. A typical day for us in our emergency operations division is about 14 to 18 hours, sometimes more, depending on that. We work 12-hour shifts, so we have a day and a night shift, except possibly for hurricanes. But snow and ice, we have a day and night shift. Work 12 hours, but there's an hour on the front end and an hour on the back end that is part of our emergency operations incident command, that we do a transition period where we spend 30-45 minutes telling the next shift what we've done, what they need to do, that kind of thing. So it's kind of like a debriefing. So it ends up being 14 plus, I'll just say, hours in a typical day. And our team's usually staged in hotels, so we're closer to the event, so we don't have to drive 3 or 4 hours home every day. But it can be long days. But during the event, we're coordinating and moving crews around based on the needs out of that GEMA Homeland Security office. And a lot of people sometimes ask us for assistance through resource requests. So we spend a part of our time, trying to help other agencies and get them things that they need.
Yeah. Amid those long hours, have you heard anything from residents, or is there anything that sort of keeps you going? I'm sure that, it could probably be really exhausting. There must be something sort of there driving you, right?
Yeah. I mean, we're obviously concerned for the safety of the traveling public and all that, but we all have families. And so I just kind of picture myself like, what if my wife or somebody has to get out on the roads and drive? And so that just kind of keeps us going just to make it safe for everybody. We do what we can to make the roads safe. We always encourage people to stay home during those type of events, of course, but I know they have to get out on the road. That and just an underlying passion for emergency management that I have is what drives me. So I enjoy helping people.
Yeah, that's great to hear. We're hitting the tail end of winter now, but as you mentioned, the East Coast has seen its fair share of snow and ice and wintry weather all over. And in particular, you were talking about how Georgia had 2 back-to-back snow events in January. So I imagine this is pretty rare for Georgia to get hit like that. So how did you fare this winter with those weather conditions, and what role did GDOT play in keeping the roads safe during those conditions?
Yeah, Georgia, we typically get anywhere between 2 to 4 snow events in a season, mostly Metro Atlanta and above. What was unique about this year was that we had them back to back, so January 10th and 21st, so 11 days apart. You're still kind of in recovery from the first one, and then the second one's coming, and so you're starting to plan for the second one while you're still dealing with the first one. So it was kind of rare in the sense that they were that close together. We don't typically have them that close together, and it kind of stretched our resources to the limit of people were tired from the first event. You've got a few days to rest, and then you're going back for the second event. But our role, we've got priority maps with routes that we are going to cover first or plow first or treat, whatever the case may be. So that's what we do for each event. We follow our plan and plow those routes. We do sometimes try to take care, especially around the metro area that we're responsible for. A couple of the major hospitals, we'll make sure they've got access in there as well so that people can get care if they need to during those events.
Mm-hmm. And while winter feels like it's coming to an end, hopefully soon, summer will be here soon enough. And with that is hurricane season. So how are you preparing ahead of hurricane season now across Georgia?
Yeah, so in the emergency operations field, you do a lot of what they call testing, training, and exercises. So you kind of practice what if this happens. So we actually, just a few weeks ago, got done with a hurricane exercise with GEMA Homeland Security. So all of the leads that I mentioned earlier, the 16 ESFs, a lot of the GEMA people, we went down to Atlanta and we ran through a scenario of a hurricane in Atlanta. And that just kind of gets us familiar with the processes and who we need to call. So there's a lot of preparation time before each season. So yeah, hurricane season's coming up. So we're reviewing our hurricane plans, making any adjustments to teams or routes that we need to, checking our debris and hauling contractors contract, making sure everything's current and up to date with that. And we also do a lot of training with our districts. So our team will go out and provide debris operation training, any kind of internal applications that we use for emergency events. We'll go out and train those districts. So it's a lot of getting ready for the season is what we do.
Mm-hmm. Also, I'm thinking about how disasters seem to be hitting more frequently and severely these days. So infrastructure resilience is such an important piece of emergency management. As an engineer, are there any solutions or technologies you've seen or are applying or maybe want to apply to help with the response to winter weather, hurricanes, and other natural disasters?
Yeah, this is a good thing about GDOT. Our commissioner is real big on emerging technology, so we're encouraged to look for those. So as far as emergency operations, we're constantly looking into new equipment and technologies. We were just recently looking at a machine that breaks up ice, as a possibility. I mentioned before, Georgia doesn't receive the snowfall that Alaska and some other states do, so it's hard for us to have a huge volume of equipment. But we've looked at certain snow and ice equipments. This past snow season and also in this January, In our northern counties, we've been trying out beet juice in our brining operations. The beet juice, it sounds weird, but it's more effective in keeping the snow and ice from sticking to the road and melting it. So just little things like that we're trying out. As a state department, we also have a resiliency committee. It's housed in our planning office, and I'm a member of that committee. And their job is to implement resilience into all of our projects. So whether it's making a bridge 2 foot taller, raising a roadway elevation or a new roadway elevation, by a couple of inches or a couple of feet to count for sea level change, all those things are run through that committee. And so resilience, in a sense, is built into our projects.
Yeah. Not to get too into a rabbit hole, but why beet juice?
It's the...
No worries if it's on the spot. I'm just curious.
Yeah, it's the sugar, glucose, something in it helps it stick to the pavement better than brine, and just some of the chemical properties. Yeah, it kind of caught me on that one. I don't have
No, it's okay.
the technical data on it, but it does work. I've seen it, and it does work a lot better than just typical a salt mixture or brine mixture does.
Yeah, weird. I think I saw something about how some states are also experimenting with pickle brine, but yeah. I won't continue down that rabbit hole.
North Carolina is a big proponent. That's where we kind of picked up on it from. North Carolina uses that a lot, beet juice.
Yeah. Do you find yourself collaborating with other states to get ideas?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Myself and my boss, we go to a lot of conferences, and we see the same, emergency leaders from those states. And so, yes, we're on different committees that's literally, a peer exchange or whatever. That's literally the focus, is for other states to come together as emergency managers, at least in this case, and discuss issues and challenges and bounce ideas off of each other. So it's a great thing to have those partnerships for sure.
We sort of talked broadly about emergencies, but are there any singular or particular past emergencies that have really stood out to you and provided lessons learned in shaping how GDOT has prepared for future disasters?
Yeah, we had a big one. I actually wasn't in this role just by a year or so when Hurricane Michael hit. It came up through the panhandle of Florida into south central Georgia, a lot of pine forest down there. And so it was a tremendous debris event. There were, trees down everywhere. And, at GDOT, I mentioned we moved crews down, and we did, but there's just only so much debris that GDOT can do effectively. And so it took a real long time to get all that debris cleared up from Michael. And one of the lessons we learned from that was that's when we got our debris contract. So, and a hauling contractor. So we can call in those additional resources to help us in the future. So that was the biggest thing that I remember that came out of Michael was we moved over to at least having several contractors on standby that we could call to help us remove all that debris and deal with it if that ever were to happen again.
Yeah. I understand too that GDOT had a role to play in supporting the COVID-19 response. Did you want to speak a little bit about that and how that may shape what people think about the holistic role of emergency operations in Georgia?
Yeah. COVID was unique. You think about, the COVID pandemic and you're like, well, what could GDOT do to help with that? So we actually worked with the Department of Public Health to deliver medical supplies to hospitals. And when I say medical supplies, not medicines, but like caps, gowns, gloves, the protective equipment that the doctors and nurses needed. And so I can't tell you for how many months, but we worked over there at the warehouse hauling all those items. We would occasionally get requests to haul hand sanitizer. So we would pick up 55-gallon drums of hand sanitizer and haul them in the back of GDOT dump trucks to wherever they were needed at. And so that was a proud moment for GDOT to, be able to know that we were helping those hospitals and doing everything we could to help with the COVID pandemic. But it was a long time working over there, but it was very, very meaningful work. And that's probably, for me, stood out the most. We respond to snow and ice and hurricanes and basically do the same thing each time. We either plow the roads or we clear them. But COVID COVID was something to be proud of. We were able to help those hospitals and get them the equipment they needed to take care of people.
Yeah, I love thinking about that because it just goes to show how when we think of emergencies, it's normally the worst things like natural disasters, but COVID in itself is almost like a medical natural disaster. So seeing how you could play a role and did play a role is really illuminating. Now, many people may not realize how big of a role their departments of transportation play in their everyday lives or in these kinds of emergencies. Do you want to speak to the larger importance of the mission that you and your partners undertake for our communities?
Yes, I mean, so for Georgia DOT, our roads are not going to last forever. So there's always a need to be able to repave those roads, maintain those roads. We cut grass, we fix pipes, we build bridges and roadways, and so those, like I said, those don't last forever, and so there's always a reoccurring need to go out and address those, and especially on the maintenance side. You could think of a dozen things at your house, and they all probably have needed maintenance at some point. It's the same thing with roadways. So, there's always something, and we will probably never get caught up on those. Always something to go out there and do and maintain. But from my aspect in emergency operations, having that centralized office, most states have an emergency operations division, but it's essential to have that coordination out of one division and specialize into that for response. Otherwise, it could be quite chaotic and, kind of imagine everybody's out doing their own thing. And so just having that coordinated effort is a big help and a big deal, especially during emergencies.
Yeah. As we've been talking, I've realized you've spent so much of your career building the roads and protecting the infrastructure that millions of Georgians rely on every day, whether they realize it or not. So what does it feel like to drive on or use the roads and infrastructure that you've built? And, especially as you've overseen the changes over the years.
Yeah, I mean, it's a proud thing. I have a family now with 2 kids, and so we'll be riding down the road and we'll go through a project that I was in charge of, and I'll be like, hey, look, Dad worked on that project, and they think it's so cool. But it's like somebody told me back when I started, as a project engineer, you're building monuments, right? So if you build a bridge, that bridge is going to be there 50 plus years, and you worked on it. So it's a very satisfying job, and knowing that you were part of that. Of course, contractors and other people helped you on it for sure. So it feels good to know that you've done something and helped out either, the traffic flow or whatever. May not get the praise during the construction. You get more complaints than anything, but when you get done, it's nice to have to help out with traffic.
Yeah, short-term pain for long-term gain. There is nothing better than driving down a smooth road that was just like built to a T.
Yeah.
Yep. Do you feel like your kids would ever want to walk in your footsteps? Do they feel inspired?
I think my oldest, he's like me. He's, got an affinity for math and seems to be pretty quick on his feet thinking for stuff. But, I'm not going to pressure my kids either way. So I'll just, whatever they decide when they get older is fine with me. They're still little right now, so we're just enjoying that.
Yeah, beautiful. Now, as we're wrapping up here, what advice do you want to give to our listeners and their communities to help them prepare for transportation challenges, that they may face in an emergency?
Yeah, the biggest thing, and it usually goes back to winter, which we're in now, is, stay at home if there's a winter event coming. You'll receive messages from GDOT, like I mentioned, 511. But if you do have to get out, and I'm one of those people that has to get out, I have to get to work, is carry a small go bag. I know that some people think that's silly, or you might be crazy to have that or whatever, but have water, snacks, gloves, extra pair of socks, phone charger, medicines, anything that you could think of that you might need if you weren't able to make it back home until the next day. We had a lot of people a few years ago during snow events. We heard reports, they were trapped out on the road and didn't have anything. They needed their medicines, or they had a baby and they didn't have, food for the baby. So there was all kind of stories that came out of that. And so it is worthwhile to have something like that in your car if you have to travel. you mentioned hurricanes earlier. That's a little different thing. You either shelter in place until it's over, or you leave several days prior to that. But yes, same thing. Having a suitcase or whatever you want to call it with stuff that you're going to need in it, especially for you and your children, if you have them, is the best advice I can get. And then pay attention to all the social media. You can follow GDOT. You'll get updates on routes and things like that to help you navigate after an event.
Excellent. Pack your bags, everyone. Stay prepared and follow GDOT. You heard the man. Matt, thank you so much for sharing about what you do, or just a little bit about the many great things you do. So much of it is behind the scenes. But like I said earlier, millions of people rely on the good work that you and your colleagues at GDOT do every day. So it was an honor to bring it to light on the show today. And hopefully our listeners can walk away, and when they get in their car or get down the road or take a train, whatever they're doing, they can take a moment of gratitude to the people like you who do this every day.
Well, I appreciate it. Yeah, thanks for having me. I enjoyed it and enjoyed speaking with y'all.
Thanks again to Matt, his colleagues at GDOT, and all of the many, many partners across our country who are keeping our communities prepared ahead of and during emergencies. If you're a Georgia resident and want to stay in the loop with the latest information on what you should be doing during an emergency, follow GDOT on social media. You can also check out the 511 GA app or website to visually look at transportation updates across your state. We'll link to them in the show notes. Thanks for joining me on Empathy Affect. Keep an eye out for next month's episode, where we'll get to learn about how the military is using medical modeling and simulation to improve healthcare readiness. It'll be a fun episode you don't want to miss. In the meantime, if you like today's show, rate us on your podcast platform of choice and make sure to give us a little love with a follow. Better yet, take a moment to share the show with a friend. Stay safe, y'all, and I hope you'll join us next time.
Empathy Effect is a product of Forrest Marsh. You can reach us at forrestmarshmedia@forrestmarsh.com with any feedback, questions, or inquiries. If you want to know more about today's guest, are interested in participating with Forrest Marsh, or becoming part of our community, check out our show notes for more information.